My name is Bob Osgood. That's how I'm commonly known, but it's Robert Giles Osgood, and I have here in my hand a account book, particularly the monthly settlements clothing account and savings bank account, and the regimental account book of Giles Osgood, my great-grandfather, who has an official number of 1300. It also mentions in here that soldier 1300 Giles Osgood enlisted in the 22nd Regiment of Foot on the 23rd of June in 1864 at Botley in the county of Hants at the age of 18 years and 10 months, born in the parish of Petersfield, in or near the town of Petersfield in the county of Hants. Trade or calling was a baker. Last permanent residence was in Botley. He was 5 foot 6.25 inches tall. His complexion was fair, eyes were gray, and his hair was brown. So that pretty well gives a physical description of him, the best that we know.
Yeah.
Of course, I never met my great-grandfather, but my grandfather, whose name was Harry, but official name was Henry Robert, from whom I'm named as well, and his sister Alice, who was the oldest and the youngest of Giles. And they told me some things about him, of which I have some things noted here, and I'll comment on them. He had his early training in England, and he was part of a draft of men selected by a Colonel Prim Harding to serve the colony in New Brunswick. And the ship landed in St. John at 1 a.m. May 4th, 1866. And they moved on to Fredericton, led by Sergeant Gregory, arriving on June 7, 1866. Upon Confederation, the fort was closed. He was to be taken back to England, but chose to stay in Canada and lived the rest of his life here, raised a family here. One of the interesting tales, hard to say how true it may or may not be, is that the reason he stayed in Canada, the new Canada, is because a young woman. He allegedly was looking out the window one day of his barracks, saw this young lady, turned to a friend and said, "I will marry that girl," and he did. He had never met her. I don't know how he met her eventually, but that is the family story, and they swear by it.
Huh, well, that's really interesting.
Well, it makes a good story.
It does.
Yeah, that's about as good as you can say. That was, the base was closed, as I have it here, in 1869, or as 1869 he left the military in any event, age 24. But he had to pay £20 sterling, and he did that on May 15th, 1869. When he left the military, he was here in the military as a baker. His father had been a baker, was a baker, and he continued in that trade. Whether he was a baker after leaving the military immediately, we don't know. But we know that he was in St. John with 2 children, my grandfather and his sister, when the St. John fire occurred. And if I remember correctly, that was in 1873, August the 9th, 1873. The business for whom he worked was wiped out. His home was wiped out. And he came back to Fredericton at some point in time, not sure exactly when, but then became the custodian at the University of New Brunswick, when the University of New Brunswick consisted of the so-called Old Arts Building and a farm. And he looked after the farm and looked after the Old Arts Building. In fact, he lived in a section of the Old Arts Building. I would assume the basement, but I really don't know. He lived at one end of the building, the president lived at the other end of the building, and the most noteworthy thing about his employment there was carrying wood for the wood stoves throughout the building. Apparently my grandfather also carried them, and I'm not surprised if maybe Alice, his younger sister, did the same thing.